Right. We are now in wedding season. On average, there are about 2 million weddings across the U.S. every year. And if you've ever attended one or been asked to participate in one, you know it can be expensive. So we asked financial expert Ann Lester, she's the author of Your Best Financial Life, to join us to find ways to help us save on all of these weddings this summer. Thanks so much for being with us, Ann.
Thank you, Heather.
Okay, let's start here. We know that people start getting invitations, sometimes to multiple weddings in a season, and these are friends and family, but it can be expensive. So what's your advice to try and cut that down?
Well, the best thing you can do to start off with is set a budget for yourself. And hopefully you've known a little bit ahead of time how many weddings you're looking at per summer. Sometimes I know people who have as many as 4 or 5 to attend. And if you're traveling, that adds up fast. So set a budget and then start working backwards. You know, what's the most important thing to you? Is it just showing up? Is it making sure you look really good? Is it making sure you can travel in style? Once you figure out what your priorities are, then you can start thinking about where you can cut back.
Well, let's talk about people that are invited to participate in wedding. The bridesmaids, the groomsmen, those costs can really add up because you may have travel, as you mentioned, and of course there's the dresses and all those other things that go with it. Is there any way of trying to control that cost?
You know, I think the best thing you can do is get really honest first with yourself and then with the friend who's asked you to be in their wedding. You know, one of the things I say is friends don't ask friends to go into debt for their wedding. I think that's we just need to get a little more comfortable having the uncomfortable conversation and just say, being really open with someone saying, look, I really want to be there. I want to support you. It's super awkward if they've been in your wedding and you're kind of like saying, yeah, now I don't have any money to be in yours. Like you don't want to end up there. But I think the more transparent you can be first with yourself and then with your friends early on about what you can and can't do, the happier you will all be in the long run.
Okay, that's some great advice because that can be a really sticky conversation. What about just making some choices about, how many, weddings you're going to end up doing? Are there some ways of still supporting the couple but maybe not going all out?
Well, I think, again, if you're not in the wedding party, saving on clothing is a great way to start. Maybe not going to all the events that you've been invited to, whether they're showers, getting creative with gifts. You don't have to necessarily pick something off the registry. You can think of gifts of time. One thing that I think can make a lot of sense if the bridal couple has a pet is doing some pet sitting for their honeymoon. That's a huge cost for most people. So think about ways you can show up for them, be a part of their day, help support the event and them, but don't necessarily involve you writing a check. And when you get creative, sometimes you can think of some of the best and most meaningful things you could do for someone.
I love that idea about offering them some other, unexpected expense, ways that you can help them cut some of those expenses. What are your tips on, buying gifts? Like I often will hit the registry early just so that I have the best options of things available. I'm curious though what your advice is.
I think hitting the registry early is one of the most important things you can do. And, some of the most memorable wedding gifts I got, and I got married a really long time ago, did not cost very much money, but they're things I use every day still. And I touch that object and think of the person who gave me that gift to this day, 30 years later. So it doesn't have to be fancy, but the more you can pick something that is meaningful. Again, I think registries can be traps because so many people getting married now have already set up a house. So you're buying things that, yeah, maybe I want the fancy panini press or the fancy coffee maker, but seriously, maybe getting creative, giving yourself a fixed budget and thinking about something that they could use later on in life, later this year, when they're not opening 100 presents at the same time, might actually be something they remember as well, because, you don't want to get lost in the pile necessarily and just feel like you've spent money on something that's, not going to be meaningful in their lives.
Yeah, great tip. That's true. You have more time to do a gift in those occasions. Ann Lester, again, the author of Your Best Financial Life. Thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, now we're ready.